Gentlemen and ladies, gentlemen first at this time, only once we'll do this. Gentlemen first, ladies. This is Tosh Talks, and I am Tosh, and I am the main book buyer at Book Soup in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, California. And once in a while, a new press comes up, or at least to me a new press, and there's a press called Wakefield Press, distributed by DAP Press, who do mostly art books. And this is all literature, not art, but interesting literature, per se. These two books are interesting. Perpetual Motion Machine by Paul SCHEERBART, and the great and well-known Georges Perec's book called Attempt at Exhausting a Place in Paris. And this is all part of a series called Imagining Science. Now, science, as we know, is a very concrete thing, just facts and stuff. But the word imagining science has a sort of a poetic wing to it, or ring to it, or it doesn't sound, it sounds like two different worlds, doesn't it? Well, that's what it sounds like to me. So these books are similar in a way. First, I'll talk about the attempt at exhausting a place in Paris. Now, Georges Perec is a fascinating writer. He passed away, I think, sometime in the 80s. And he was a person who was fascinated with mathematics. He was interested in doing crossword puzzles. In fact, he had a job writing a crossword puzzle for a big French newspaper chain. And a lot of his work is a lot of wordplay and stuff. And he wrote lots of works, and they're all quite different from each other, but they're all very playful. The text is very playful, and it's kind of humorous. And it plays with time, language, and sort of the placement of the writer when he's writing about the subject, and where the writer is and where the subject is. And it sounds kind of complicated and kind of arty, but it's actually very charming, especially when you read it. It's a very charming work. And this particular book is very interesting. There's a place in Paris called Saint-Sulpice. It's a church area. It's not far from Saint-Germain. And what Georges Perec did was he went there every day for like a weekend. Just give it a year. This is sort of like a diary in a way. He went there on, started on October 18th, 1974. And what he would do is he'll sit in the park bench or sit in the cafe and write what was happening around him. And in a way, it's sort of like if you're a private detective. It's like you're a detective and you're just writing about something in front of you, but it's very dry notes. There's very little emotion here, or very much subjective viewpoint and stuff. First, it reads very objective, like a car goes by with a license plate, blah, blah, blah. Or a woman wearing an orange jacket just walked by with two kids. But then he might comment like, on a very nice jacket with a nice orange jacket with two kids. So it changes slightly, the subtlety of it. And you got to think like, well, that's kind of boring. I could do that. I can just sit there and write about an area, just sitting there and commenting what's happening around me with no narrative. So what makes this kind of special? And I think what's special is each writer who writes something observes things differently. I look at you in the camera, and what I see is I see you, but if you're in my place, you'll see it quite differently, perhaps. And that's where the subjective thing is. You can never be totally subjective. I mean, totally objective, excuse me. And it's what's interesting in the book. I'll just read a little bit of what he wrote. Like this is like October 18th, 1974, 5:10 p.m. And he's at the Café de la Mar, which I know is. This is another side story. I was actually at this location. Before I even read this book, I felt compelled just to sit there. And it's not. I mean, it's a busy area, but it's not like a grand boulevard. It's more of a major, smaller street where a lot of people are walking by, and life goes on. And I was drawn to this area for some reason. So you can imagine my surprise that some writer actually wrote about the same location, just sitting there observing people. So this is what he writes. The newspaper kiosk was closed. I didn't find Le Monde. I took a short walk, Rue de Kemps, Rue de Four, Rue de Bonaparte. Idle beauties swarming into the fashion shops. I like that word, idle beauties. Not just beautiful girls, but just idle beauties just wandering around. En route Bonaparte, I looked at the titles of some books on sale, some store windows, antique and modern furniture, used books, drawing, and engravings. It's cold and crispy, so it seems to me. And he talks about the temperature a lot and how the weather changes. Then he talks about buses that goes by. 86 goes by, empty. A 70 goes by, full. A group of children are playing ball in front of the church. A 70 goes by, nearly empty. 63 goes by, almost full. These are all buses that's going by the street. And so he just adds more information, more information, more information, more information. And it doesn't really go anywhere. That's all you're getting out of this book. And after being there and reading this book, I'm really getting a full picture of that corner. I know what it's like. And I could put my own subjective viewpoints, what's happening around there, because I'm reading it, but I'm reading it maybe a little differently than the way he's telling it to me. Because he's giving me like the bone facts, and then I'm projecting something as a reader. And I find it very interesting, the relationship between author and reader, and what a reader puts into the text. And I guess this gives that sort of experimental stage, because it's not really a narrative. It doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have a middle, it doesn't have an end. But yet it does, because it's dated, it's like a diary. He's there a certain time every day for a weekend. And he comments what happened Friday, what happened Saturday. Sunday's totally different because all the shops are closed. So less traffic, and he comments on that and what's the mood of the place is like. So in a way, it's like a detective or a private eye who's in a car trying to figure out where everything is and what's happening, and not really making too much subjective choices, though he chooses what to write about, of course. It's an interesting observation of a neighborhood, of a particular time, and a particular day. And it's a fascinating form of writing. And this book I think about a lot for some reason. It stays with you. It's an incredible book. Now, this book, another science book, The Perpetual Motion Machines, written by Paul SCHEERBART, a German writer of turn of the century. I think he was born like in the 1880s, died in during World War I. He died, not at war, but basically he was just totally traumatized by the whole war situation at the time. And Perpetual, he was a writer, he was an art critic, a theater critic, I think he wrote plays. He's a totally obscure person to me. I never heard of him until this book. And what's interesting about this book is he actually built a machine. He was obsessed about building perpetual motion machine. Now, perpetual motion machine strikes me as something that doesn't stop, just keeps on going. But what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of this machine? I read this book twice, and I can't figure out what the purpose of the machine is whatsoever, except to make the machine. So this is like a diary of sorts, like this is sort of like a diary of a scientific journal, sort of scientific journal as well, where he builds a machine. So he hires engineers or has engineer friends to help him, as well as plumbers. Plumbers are like sort of like engineers at that time. And he builds these machines. Like he started off, he drew these diagrams like this, like his first machine, like where to put the wheel, how to keep things going, and it ends up sort of like this in the end. And I don't know if he ever finished his machine. He doesn't talk about that. But he talks about like his frustrations trying to get this thing working and not working, and building the right wheel and the right chain to make it go. So it's basically, as far as I can gather, it's him inventing a machine that he doesn't fully know what the purpose is. And it actually, he treats it like a science manual, but it actually has a sort of spiritual sense of, or at its very one end, totally existential, where you're doing something for the purpose of doing it, but you really not know what the results are, you're living for the moment. Or two, he has a sort of a spiritual sense. He was very much into astrology, not astrology, but like the stars and the earth and the moon, and he felt those were all like living things. He never felt like they're like dead objects, or they're not dead objects, but he really felt like a spiritual sense of power with this. So I think building the machine was sort of like a spiritual endeavor with him. And he was totally obsessed with building this thing, which he never finished or never could really figure out what's its purpose really. He doesn't even discuss what the purpose is. It's all about building it. And what happens afterwards, I don't know. I mean, like it just finishes like he couldn't finish it. And it's very interesting because he gets frustrated at certain points, and he goes back to it like 3 days later or 4 days later. And both these books are quite eccentric. I mean, they're like the definition of eccentric writing. it's an incredible book. And then the same press put out a book called The Leg of Lamb, Its Life and Work by Benjamin PERET. Now, Benjamin PERET is probably the standard quote-unquote surrealist writer. What we think of surrealists, pigs are falling from the sky, flowers are going on my nose. He is the person who really defined surrealism as literature. Andre Breton, I think, thought of it. Could be the creator of it. But PERET was definitely the spokesperson of surrealism of sorts. And this is a fascinating collection of short stories or short narratives that Benjamin PERET wrote. And they're all funny. They're all like straight ahead narratives. It has a beginning, has a middle, and an end. But it goes crazy from A to B to C. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it. I'm not sure if I can read the whole story. But I'm going to have to stop. But just to get you an idea what it is. This is called The Condemned Man's Last Night. Just let me fix my hair and I'll be there. I was the one speaking. I was perched on one of the highest branches of a 100-year-old chestnut tree. It was raining heavily. Children were playing at the foot of the tree. Inside the trunk, which was hollow and held together only by the bark, a hen was laying one egg after another and then pecking them into pieces. The person I was speaking to, a young farmer from the area, always took off his goatee and put it in his pocket, and when he was tired, especially in the evening, and smoked a big blue glass pipe, which was nothing but a hollowed-out insular fitted with a reed pipe. I came down from my tree and took my friend by the arm, and we went off to go hunting, although the current regulations do not allow it at that time of year. And then all of a sudden he's in jail. At that moment, the door to my cell crashed open, and an 8-year-old child entered, dragging an utterly black little goat, followed by a crowd of people I didn't know. Among them was my defense attorney. He was holding a pair of suspenders, which he was stubbornly fastening, and his lips were moving, pronouncing words I couldn't hear. Quote unquote, "Hello, Papa," said the child, and he pushed the goat under the bed. One of the men I didn't know approached me and said, "Benjamin PERET, you know what's happening?" Me, "No." He, "Write what you like." Me, "I have nothing to write." He, "Okay, get dressed." I got dressed, shaved carefully, unplugged my electric bulb out of habit, read some verses from the Bible and a chapter from the 11,000 rods, and announced that I was ready. And then it goes on about him getting ready for his execution, and as he approached the execution, he says, "I asked if I could make a telephone call." "To whom?" The executioner asked. "It doesn't matter," I told him. "I just want to make a call." He saw no reason to refuse. I asked for a number. It was that of an admiral who, allowing me no time to speak, announced that he was going to leave Paris to board his ship. He had to take part in naval maneuvers in the Mediterranean. I hung up the phone. They threw me into the basket. I found myself in the same state of sexual excitement as when I first saw the guillotine. Monsieur de Villers noticed and enjoined one of his assistants to satisfy me. "Since he is about to die and there are no women present," he said, "you may as well satisfy him." Never in my life had I experienced such a complete climax. It is true that I was about to die. In fact, just a few moments later, the blade of the guillotine fell onto my head. Justice was served, as they say. And this is just one example of this guy's work. He's a genius. Benjamin PERET is a great, great, great poet, narrative poet of sorts. And I really, really strongly recommend the Wakefield Press. These books are beautifully designed, beautiful paper, smells good. And so, The Leg of Lamb, Benjamin PERET, The Perpetual Motion Machine, The Story of Invention by Paul Scheerbart, and the better known and legendary and the great Georges PEREC, Attempt at Exhausting a Place in Paris. Get these books, you will not be disappointed. Thanks for the journey. Take care. Bye-bye.